Hi everybody, my name is Arun Dayanandan. I'm at Concordia University. I am not the Dr. Dayanandan. That would be the patriarch that's sitting behind the camera back there. But maybe one day, hopefully one day I will be a Dr. Dayanandan. Or Dr. A. Dayanandan. So I'll be talking to you guys about shifting mate selection and courtship behavior in response to changing predation regimes in a tropical fish species. You can see this fish species of choice right on the front here. They're Trinidadian guppies. They're really cute, aren't they? So I put them on the front so you can avoid looking at me. But first I'm going to tell you why I look at them. So invasive species. Trinidadian guppies are an invasive species in many parts of the world. Invasive species are one of the major threats to biodiversity. According to the IUCN, it's number 5 on this list, including climate change, deforestation, and overexploitation. They threaten biodiversity in a number of different ways. They threaten ecosystem integrity. They compete with other native species. They're bad news. Invasive species in general are bad news. So you can see a bunch of these over here. And they do this by competing with others, by eating their eggs, by competing for resources such as space and foraging sites and home ranges and things like that. And they modify their environment. And according to IUCN, approximately 50% of all recent species extinctions can be traced in some way, shape, or form to an introduced species, an introduced invasive species, actually. And in North America, 70% of fish extinctions in the last century in North America can be linked to invasive species. Now, where I'm really interested in is looking at their behavior, because behavioral plasticity is extremely important in determining what is invasive and what makes something potentially invasive. And this is because species that can acclimate to an environment faster tend to be better invaders. And one way they do this is through responding to chemical cues, or rather predation risk cues. Now, because it's an audience of biogeographers and not really behavior people, I'm going to have fun with this, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to scare some of you. Because all organisms, whether they're plants, animals, they respond to cues in their environments. And animals do it differently because they can actually respond actively through hormones and through movement and all sorts of fun things. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to come over here. It's very nerve-wracking, isn't it, to have someone come right up close. You don't really expect that. And essentially, Ravikant here, and he's a good sport. He's a braver man than I am. But I know right now that many of you are just as afraid. I can see the sweat dripping off of some of you because you're wondering, what's he gonna do? What's gonna happen? Well, the same thing happens in fish, and there's a number of different cues that fish can pick up on. Now imagine I did the same experiment. We use different cues, right? I mean, this wasn't in my hand before. I mean, it doesn't mean anything, nothing changed, but yet we still look at what our actions were, why was I staring deeply into his eyes? What was this that I was holding in my hand? What am I gonna do with it? So there's a lot of different cues that we can pick up when we're looking at, predation risk. What's a threat? And so threat-sensitive responses and threat-sensitive chemical cues are precisely what fish react to. In the case of fish, they prefer to look at olfactory cues. So there are 2 types of cues. There are disturbance cues and there are alarm cues. And I'm going to tell you really quickly why these are called threat-sensitive cues. Now, for example, what's your name? Asavari? Okay, cool. So now imagine, right? I was picking on Ravikant here, and I'm gonna be a predator. I'm gonna eat you, and I'm gonna eat you, right? What's your name? Sorry? Saket. Okay, cool. What's your name? Kelsey. Cool. So I'm gonna eat you 3, but I'm not gonna eat you. And the reason for that is because I like people that wear blue shirts. Right? So it doesn't make sense for you to react, right? If I'm gonna come in and eat you guys, it doesn't make sense for you to freak out because that could be a trade-off. Maybe you're gonna hide away, you're gonna miss all these delicious foraging opportunities, the amazing lunches that are out there, and then you're gonna starve, right? And it's more food for everybody else, but unfortunately you're not gonna live to reproduce and your genes are gonna go down. So there's a trade-off, and so we don't wanna respond to everything in our environment, so we need to be a bit more selective with that. And so the 2 types of cues, disturbance cues and alarm cues, these are at 2 different threat levels. Disturbance cues are like if I just peed my pants. Something scared me, I peed my pants, and maybe it was something really scary, maybe it was not, maybe I'm just a weirdo up front here, peeing my pants, and you guys can kind of keep going on with your day. it's probably a good idea just to keep eating the delicious lunches and buffets out there. But if it's an alarm cue, they're also called damaged release alarm cues, and this is because this is released from the skin of a fish that has been attacked. So if the skin is damaged, this chemical is released. Now that'd be the equivalent of, say, something came and bit a chunk out of my hip here, and I'm probably still the weirdo that's up front here, but regardless, you probably don't want to be hanging out here if you're smelling all this blood. You're like, yeah, he's a weirdo, but something just ate him, so I'm going to take off. So that's the difference between a disturbance cue and a damage-released alarm cue. There's two different threat levels. And so we've looked at them for a number of different things, so spatial exploration, foraging, but we don't really know about mate selection. And the reason mate selection is so interesting is because when it comes to females and mating, in a courtship, especially in Trinidadian guppies, we've seen that because guppies, the males are very pretty, bright, the females tend to be kind of dull, but they're much larger. A predator will spot a prettier male and then go and eat the female, because for the same amount of effort, that predator gets a lot more food. So for the female, there's a trade-off that exists when it comes to choosing a mate when there's a predator or a high predation environment that it's mating in. Where's my, there we go. So what I wanted to see is if I reared some of these female fish in an environment that had a lot of predation, will we see will the female organism, in this case a fish, prefer to change, or rather, change away from what might be genetically optimal? Is she going to go for the less pretty male fish? So I predicted that she would select duller colored males because she wants to stay hidden. That she would actually reduce her decision-making time, choose mate really quick, and there we go, we have babies, great. And spend less time moving between males. Again, because as soon as you make your choice, you want to stick with it so you don't get eaten in the meantime. And so here's our lovely fish. Again, more cute pictures to avoid looking at this. So Trinidadian guppies, they're invasive. They're found in 73 countries outside of their home range. They have been introduced for a number of reasons, so mosquito control, as well as they've just been released from the aquarium trade. Actually, in India, there is a guppy project that's actually proved to be successful in the Northeast. These guppies have been introduced in the region to control mosquitoes that spread malaria because they eat the larvae. But they're also found in other parts of India, and South India especially, and they've been found to actually avoid those, or not really eat those larvae, because when given the choice, the fish, the guppies, prefer to eat other insect larvae. And this could be endemic species, this could be any other species. So once those mosquitoes go down, that's another question. What happens? What do the guppies do? Because they are prolific breeders, and we can't just get rid of them overnight. Because the environment they come from in Trinidad is extremely varied, they have a lot of different types of environments, they are very adaptable, and so they can easily place their roots down in a variety of different environments, which also leads to invasive potential. And they do outcompete local species for food. They also will eat the eggs of certain species. That's been seen in some parts of the world, in North America, for example. So they can be a problem, but it's this kind of trade-off, because in some cases they're good, but they're also bad. But we need to know more about what's going on with these fish. So what I did was I took these F1 generations, so female guppies that were the first generation born from wild-caught Trinidadian guppies. Put them into what you see on the top here. So this little tank set up here. Gave them 3 days to acclimate. A day to acclimate, 3 days of treatment. That treatment included giving them either a disturbance cue, an alarm cue, so the damage release alarm cue, or a control, which was distilled water, and as well as a visual predator cue, which was basically a predator model on a lure, which was then, or on a stick, which was then moved back and forth to simulate a visual stimulus along with this chemical stimulus. And then on day 5, they were moved to this second apparatus that you see on the bottom, which is essentially a tank with 2 other tanks on either side. The female went in the center, and she was given a choice between a pretty male and a dull male. And this was ascertained by basically how much blue was on the male, because blue is a very expensive color, and so the bluer a male, essentially the prettier, the more genetically optimal that would be. The behaviors, so everything was recorded with GoPros. The behaviors were analyzed using Boris software. The colors were calculated using ImageJ, and Photoshop and a variety of fun image analysis tools. And the main measures that I looked at were male body length, male coloration, female latency to enter, which is how long it took for her to go into a side, so her first decision, the number of line crosses, so going back and forth, This time she spent with the colorful male. The gonopodial thrust, it's an aspect of male behavior, basically the male trying to mate with the female through the glass wall of the tank. Male sigmoidal display, so he's showing off, again, male behavior to see, okay, is he actually interested in her? And the amount of time the female spent with both males, and that was actually overall sexual activity of the female guppy. And so I have that here, time until first choice. The second was called sampling frequency, the preferred choice, and the female sexual activity, and that's what we see here. And really the most important thing comparing between the control disturbance cue, control and alarm cue, is that sampling frequency and female sexual activity were found in disturbance cue to be different between the control, but not so between the control and the alarm cue. And so what this tells us is there might be some kind of a threshold. So in other words, it's not a linear effect. It's not that the more threat, the more behavior change we see. What it could be is that there's a different opportunity cost. So in other words, maybe in an alarm cue situation, the female is so scared she figures, okay, I'm just going to go mate, forget all the other stuff. But when it's medium risk, maybe she's a bit more cautious and she starts to actually think about the kind of decisions she's making. And this tells us it's a lot more complex than we originally thought. And so for that reason, there's a lot more research to be done looking at these behaviors. And so actually currently there's an undergraduate student doing his honors thesis. He worked with me for a lot of this work. And he'll be looking at acute versus ambient risk. So essentially if you scare them the same day that we test them, whether or not there's a change in the behavior, he'll be looking at longer periods of scaring to see if there's any kind of change in that effect. Another project I'm working on currently is looking at maternal carryover effects. So what happens to the babies of these females? Are the babies showing differences in their behaviors? And then also I'm currently here, in India on a research fellowship where I'm studying kind of an invasive species of land snail and looking at behavior and genetics, and I'm super excited to talk about all that stuff. I'm working with Aravind, and it's a lot of fun. So it's just getting started, and so I'm really, really psyched. And look at that, that's a beautiful snail too. I only work with beautiful creatures because again, so with that, these are my funding agencies. Thank you so much to them. Thank you to my wonderful, unwilling, compatriots over here. And thank you all for listening.